isn't our first rodeo, so to speak, because I have actually interviewed Clare on a podcast before, and I was just absolutely fascinated by your journey and I suppose the business growth and where it has come from and where it has gone to. It was founded with your brother Paul, and I suppose it's fair to say that it wasn't always as glamorous as £1 million of rug sales, was it?
No, I think that would be very fair to say, Deborah. Yeah, business, I don't think we ever really wanted to go into business, certainly not selling rugs. But in reality, looking back, it's all we really our dad and uncle had owned auto supplies. Actually, a lot of people would know it, Kilmurray Street in the town here. So that was since before I was born. So that's all we really heard growing up was business talk around the table. And I suppose subconsciously when you're hearing that from a young age, that just becomes the norm in the family. In later years then our dad was actually doing markets, and that's really where the rugs come into our life. He had sold quite a few different things in the markets over the years, from kids' clothes and shoes and different things, but eventually he settled on rugs, and I think maybe lost it at the back. That came off the back of a rug shop that was beside. Sorry, I skipped a wee bit there. My mum and dad actually had an ornament shop in Monaghan Street in the town for a few years, and there was a carpet shop beside them, and he often looked at how busy they were compared to how quiet they were, and he decided that rugs seemed like a good thing to sell. And I think, long story short, Deborah, both me and Paul swore at different points in those teenage years spent in the markets that never would we be involved in retail, and certainly never would we sell rugs. So I think it's we got that a little bit wrong, but
something has gone dramatically wrong there, Claire.
Something has gone dramatically wrong. The reality is retail is all we knew. Market life is incredibly difficult. Neither of us we're quite fond of hard work, but we're not just that fond of it. That our main passion was to find an alternative way to sell rugs that didn't involve a market stall.
And I suppose there is a tenacity there in growing up in business and that idea of trading and street trading, which is a difficulty. And I suppose back in the day, the interesting thing for people would be is how do you make that jump from selling rugs in a market to then being able to trade online? Like, I mean, the investment even that would take, how did you go about doing that?
Again, no master plan behind it. We had went with our Uncle Francie actually to London to see Crossmaglen playing Rice Slip. Again, no thought towards online sales at all, but he had seen a course, this is our uncle, for how to sell on eBay. And just to frame this for everybody, this was back in 2006, whenever eBay really was a novelty and nobody knew how to sell on it. And so me, Paul and Francie went to that course, and I think it's fair to say me and Paul came home that evening absolutely besotted with the idea of online sales. The fact that you can go to bed at night, you've listed a product during the day, go to bed that night, and you wake up in the morning and something is sold was just phenomenal to us. We had been used to getting up at 5 in the morning, setting up a market stall, putting a cover on it, maybe coming home at the end of that day with €50. So this really was just, it was newfangled as well. We didn't have a clue how to do it, was the honest answer. And in hindsight now, we spent quite a few years figuring that bit out. Marketplaces where we started our journey. It was eBay that we first started selling. It wasn't actually rugs, it was sort of ornaments and vases and pretty much whatever we could get our hands on. And then eventually Daddy kindly donated some rugs to us to sell that he was having trouble with. It was the last of the donations. From then on we were buying them from him. But it was just very organic. It was just for us a matter of bit by bit figuring it out. We were buying from local wholesalers. We were ramming the car full of rugs, driving them back to our house in the middle of nowhere, photographing them ourselves, listing them, packing them, doing all of that ourselves. And eventually we were like, this is hard work. We keep running out of product. We'd put a lot of effort into photographing it, listing it, go back to the wholesaler the next week and they didn't have it anymore. And we're going to have to start over again here. So we very quickly realised we wanted to do it on a bigger scale, and that's seen us going over to Germany to one of the big floor shows and buying our first container. And again, there was a lot of hurdles there. There was a lot of people trying to, mostly the local wholesalers to be fair, who we met out there. really trying to put us off that journey and telling us about these massive MOQs and tariffs, customs, the difficulties of importing containers. But I think probably one of the good things with being only maybe, what were we, 19 and 22, 23, we didn't know any better. We just said, the hell with that, we'll give it a go. And that's really what we've done. And we've spent every year from that just adding bits on and trying to figure new channels out, new products out, and still very much learning today.
And I think there's a very important message in that for the room, because it's not just do it and leave it and sit. Yes, you know, while it's exciting to go to bed and see the sales rolling in, I think if you listen to Clare there, you can very clearly see that it's not an easy journey. And I think maybe that's a misconception that people have in e-commerce, that, you know, this is going to be really easy. I just have to sit and see the sales rolling in. And I think, you know, that is a key takeaway from today. Anybody embarking on this journey, it's just not going to happen straight away. I think for the educators in the room, it's important to show that you have to keep educating yourself. As you said, I'm sure there was plenty of mistakes made along the way. But I'm interested that you said you started off on eBay, but I believe you did get a phone call at some stage in relation to another channel. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We did, yeah. And it's something that a lot of people find very entertaining in today's world, because it's the complete inverse of this now. By 2008, we were the biggest rug sellers on eBay, and that was eBay UK. And we actually got a call from Amazon. So if you can cast your minds back to Amazon circa 2008, it was DVDs and CDs, and that's all Amazon were selling. They were on their own growth journey. They were trying to build their categories out, and their approach to doing that was basically poach all the biggest sellers off eBay. They were so aggressive with it that they were going to take our entire catalogue and list it for us. But again, that's something we were quite a bit knowledgeable on at that point. And I think I still hear a lot of people speaking about that today, that, you know, somebody's just going to take their catalogue and list it for them. And if you're going to let that happen, it better be the right somebody, because, you know, it's your catalogue, it's your product, you're the best person who knows how to sell it, the keywords, the imagery, what the customer's talking about in relation to it. And, you know, unless you can find a good, and there are plenty of them, but you need to make sure you find a good expert who'll know that data themselves. But that's what myself and Paul decided to do. We agreed to Amazon that we would go on the channel, but we'd done all the hard work ourselves. We made all of the listings, took all of the images for the channel, made them different to eBay. At that time, Google Shopping was starting to make inroads, and it was really important to have different keywords for different channels and stuff. So I think that's ultimately why we were very successful in Amazon, because we didn't just do what they wanted us to do. And I suppose it's that bit of knowledge that sometimes the channel themselves don't actually know the best way to sell your product. It really is up to the retailer.
I think, though, when Jeff comes knocking, you know, you're doing something right to start off with, you know, and it's a wonderful accolade to hear that sort of thing is happening. But I suppose now you're shipping close to 100,000 rugs per year, right here from Newry. How has that level of scale happened? And I suppose for the people in the room here, we're probably interested in, you know, what percentage. We've talked about around 80% of that being online. I mean, they're magical numbers to most of the people in the room. How do you get to that point, Clare?
Again, it's easy with hindsight. Whenever we were going through this process, a lot of this wasn't very intentional. Bits and pieces of it were, but something, as I reflect back, we were always very clear on was we were chasing scale, and we didn't really know that at the time. I think we just understood that in order to make the costs of selling online work, you know, we would have to have bulk sales. I think everybody is pretty well aware now selling online is definitely not free. There are a lot of costs into the very basics of converting a sale, never mind the enormous costs that are involved in getting a customer to your platform in the first place. For us, really, the only way to make that work was to go after volume. So that's why we were buying direct quite early on from manufacturers, and very intentionally cutting out the middleman to give us that opportunity to, we spotted that opportunity in our market. Nobody else was doing that, and therefore rugs were extortionately priced. We knew we could bring in very similar rugs, definitely similar patterns, designs, but actually offer them to the customer at a much cheaper price. That strategy worked really well for us for years on the marketplaces, because that was one of the main drivers of sales there. We take a different approach now for our website and for social sales. We've evolved the business past that, but very much it's always with scale in mind. So it's very rare that we'll take on a new project or adopt a new strategy that doesn't have its core based in volume sales.
I'll come back to that point in a wee second. Don't forget that you can submit your questions on Slido if there's anything that we don't cover here that you want to ask Clare. So do scan the QR code. But I think, you know, just to drill down into that a little bit, you touched on, Paul mentioned about this notion of pay to play, and you've talked about there. I suppose if we could help educate the audience around what that actually means. I mean, it's not free to trade online by any stretch of the imagination. Can you give us a wee sense of what that looks like in your business in terms of maybe percentages on the different channels and how you manage that?
Yeah, so again, from the business strategy overall, we'd often talk about blended margins, the margin we need as a business to make the business work ultimately, to cover operating costs, but it never just works out. I'm sure everybody has their own version of this in their business, but it never just works out that straightforward. We pay different percentages on different channels, and none of those channels are aligned. So our direct sales fees, so the fee we literally just pay to the platform for listing on their channel, varies really between sort of 15 and 20%, with the likes of Amazon and eBay being at the lower ends of that. So even for our own website, where we operate in Shopify Plus, so we're really only looking at credit card processing fees. The reality is our internet and advertising fees are quite high now. So I think, Paul, they're probably sitting around 25%. There was a dream period during COVID where they were below 10%, but even we knew that was not going to be sustainable. And I think they are the kind of percentages you need to keep in mind, because actually getting customers to the platforms is the most costly part of it. Even with a lot of the marketplaces, so you can list the product quite simply, you can pay the 15 to 20% sale fee, but a lot of those are moving towards pay to play as well. So marketing incentives, sort of being part of their email campaigns, getting banner spots, you know, it's really what are you willing to pay to get exposure on their sites. Obviously you have shipping costs as well, so it's, for us selling rugs, shipping costs are a huge percentage of our sale fees. I often wish we sold something that came in a nice tidy little box, but we deal with big, long, bulky items, and most couriers absolutely hate us because we just don't fit neatly onto their automated systems. But again, that's been an opportunity for us. We're dealing with a product that the big guys don't want to deal with because it's, in truth, just too awkward and not profitable enough for them. So that's a massive gap for us. And again, why we've always stuck rigidly to saying we're a rug-only business, because we know that's where our big gap is. But it is far from free. You know, I think that notion is gone from most people. I think a lot of people do believe it can be cheaper maybe than in-store retail. We've two shops. We've had the Newry shop now for 10 years and the Belfast shop since 2017. So we've a fair experience in both. And we were just chatting about this actually quite recently. The costs are comparable between the in-store and the online, you know, and that's within our model of really paying to get customers to our own platforms. But the reality with online is you can scale those costs up and down a lot easier, and it's a point we come back to quite often because the retail question comes up a lot, and we are exploring retail avenues in other areas. But the trouble with the bricks and mortar retail is when you're locked into a rental lease, you know, you can't scale that up or down depending on the market. At least with online you can. So that's why we've always been quite sort of buoyant and happy to pay those fees, because we know the opportunity is there to turn it off if we need to.
And that's really interesting that you say that. I suppose the costs are comparable. I'm going to come back to your bricks and mortar opportunity in a second or two. I have a couple of questions in here. I'm going to touch a wee bit more on what you said. I think one is a cheeky one, which I believe could have come in from your brother, asking who is the older sibling. So we might leave that one to sit because I think guessing on who asked it, we maybe know the answer, do we?
At least it's not as bad as somebody asked a couple of weeks ago, were we twins? So.
So I do have a question in here asking about the key profiles in the business that drive your commerce activity, and I suppose this is somebody coming from a bricks and mortar business, you know, asking what resources they need to consider to have a good e-commerce transition. And it is one of the things that I suppose I had down here as well, is, you know, from a technology perspective, you know, it's just not about having the platforms set up and operational. You have a huge number of, I suppose, for want of a better word, apps and content in behind that. You know, can you give us a sense of what your technology spec looks like to make the level of sales that you make?
Yeah, there's a lot, and again, we've went through a lot, and you know, we've tested a lot of apps and platforms over the years, and like anything, they're good for a couple of years and then something better comes along. So the main thing I would say about technology is it's something you have to be very mindful of continuously. We have never found one solution and went, yep, that's it, and 15 years later still been using it.
So it's lots of interactions with
yeah, and really for us as well, and there would be a lot of different views in the room on this. This is just my opinion on it. Off the box, off the shelf options really are better, because certainly in our middle years, as I like to call them, when we were just about getting big enough to really need a lot of these things but couldn't afford them, we definitely couldn't afford developers to continually work on apps and platforms and all for us. And I know that is favoured by a lot of people, especially from the start, but just always be mindful with that. When the market changes, when marketplaces change their link-ups and APIs and all, you're constantly going to need somebody updating those things for you. So,
and there's a risk as well. You know, I've experienced clients where they've maybe gone with even a purpose-built website, and that company then has gone into administration, and basically their profile has disappeared with it. So,
yeah.
you know, the off-the-shelf probably gives you more flexibility. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. And at this point, it's very hard to look past Shopify, because even the vast majority of developers are becoming Shopify developers themselves, just in line with what's happening in the market. So there are a lot of developers available, both locally, freelance, a lot of opportunities there. But it is the main platform, and it's developing at a fantastic rate to make the user experience really, really good. So we are Shopify Plus customers, and we wouldn't recommend anything else at all. I think that is the future, certainly the future that we can see for now until something better comes along. I think it's really important as well from the back end systems, if you're going to consider your own website and other channels, to have a system that integrates those sales. So we use StoreFeeder, and we've been using StoreFeeder for probably 10 years at this point. The good thing about that is we've paved the way for everybody, because I think they absolutely hate us. We are their guinea pig for everything, and they get good, honest feedback.
So just explain to us, what is StoreFeeder?
So StoreFeeder literally takes the sales from each channel and integrates them into one place. It acts as our warehousing system, but other people may plug it into different warehousing systems or stock systems and couriers, stuff like that. Because we believe data is so important in pretty much every decision we make, you need that central platform that the data systems can also plug into. And we are using Power BI, which again, we invested into realistically probably long before we could afford to, but it was in recognition of the decisions we could make with data to hand. But if you're trying to feed sort of sales information into any of those systems from maybe 7 or 8 different platforms, none of them talking to each other, you know, you're never going to get that data to a usable point. So StoreFeeder and Power BI really are the biggest tools we use. We have lots of others. We use the likes of Bamboo for managing staff and goals and reviews and wages, actually, for quite a bit of it. We use paperless and accounting software, and both myself and Paul are here. We're happy to chat to anybody who has questions after about that.
Use some Google support as well?
Yeah, everything we do actually is Google based. So all of our emails, all of our documents, spreadsheets. So whereas a lot of people maybe would have been Outlook, you know, everything we do is Google based, and that's something we're very comfortable with. Again, in the early years, people were like, oh, that's madness, Google aren't up to spec, but we were very much banking on Google getting up to spec, and they certainly have. So it's not absolutely perfect, none of the systems are, but Google provides a lot of answers. That's all of our chat platforms, and everything's integrated with Google.
And he's in my eye line, but Derek is here with us from BT. But I mean, do any of this without the connectivity, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in the panel session later on. I have another question in here, which is, do you think that organic social is almost more powerful than paid now? And asking, what is your split between organic and paid activity? And I think this is the age-eternal battle. This is nearly the Newry and Dundalk. One is either doing better than the other at any particular time. What's your views as to what's happening currently in that social space? And I suppose to get a sense of, what percentage of sales do you think come from social marketing? I know Paul had given us the couple of different avenues that you use.
Yeah, so again, this area is changing all the time, and the answer I give you today is very likely going to be different next year. It was certainly different this time last year. So whereas paid Google ads had always reigned supreme, we're now actually seeing our paid social is our biggest driver of sales, followed by Google, followed then by organic social. So there's
so paid social,
and then Google paid, yeah. So that's Google Shopping, Google
and then
ads,
organic social.
Yeah. And actually the biggest one overall is direct returning customers. So our biggest source of revenue on our website is returning customers. That's about 30% of our revenue.
So how do you interact with those people? Is that through email marketing?
Emails and organic social. So email marketing is a huge one for us. And again, that's Klaviyo. So a fantastic platform. We have a team that do a lot of work there in the database, essentially, because you're charged per customer that you have in your database, essentially. But as we all know, there's a lot of very disengaged customers. So they've done a lot of work over the last year to whittle down that database to a very engaged customer set, and we generate a lot of revenue via email as well. So it's coming from a lot of different channels. It's really varying. Paid social, in my opinion, you just have to be on it. Like you do have to be running social ads, directing traffic towards your site. But the content of those paid socials is even very much debatable per industry. So for us, it's a lot of video content, it's a lot of influencers, UGC. We're actually paying UGC companies to create content for us.
So that's user-generated content?
It's user-generated content. So that's people who really look like they have the rug in their own home, and they do, essentially. It's just not their own home, essentially, and we paid them to make that content. So I think whenever people are really considering going online, it can be very intimidating because you get all of these different things thrown at you and you don't know where to start, and nor did we. And my advice would really be to pick one of them and to get really good at it, because you can go through spend very quickly on these channels if you're not getting to grips with it and split testing content to see what works. I can tell you it works for our industry, but it will be different. It'll be different for fashion. Laura will have a different experience again. It'll be different for electronics, for fast moving consumer goods. It's just different per industry. For us, it's really very much people want to see rugs in a home context. A graphic with a nice pretty rug on it has its place, but that's not where the majority of our sales are coming from. So there's lots of experts out there. There's lots of marketing agencies local to here who'll really be able to help you with that and help be able to discover what it is for your industry. But you really can't beat just testing, getting the different, and you can do it yourself. Sometimes we overcomplicate this. The good thing about social media now compared even 2 or 3 years ago, people are engaging far more with authentic content. They're not looking at super high production, really glossy images, stuff like they're and again, it's still professionals creating a lot of this content, but it is about authentic. It is actually about, a lot of times, the owner of the business getting in front of the camera and talking a bit about the product and about the business. That's really where independents are winning out against the big players.
I think I see Maeve nodding over there. Maeve's going to be talking to us a little bit more about those different channels. And I suppose, the interesting thing for me in that, Claire, is it shows a real in-depth understanding of your customer. And I think us working in the marketing communication space can't drive that home enough to people. What content do you like to see? Sometimes people think, I have to put up this product, or I have to do, it's thinking about your customer and what they actually will engage with, and understanding what we talk about, those customer personas, who they are. Do you do that type of exercise regularly?
We do, yeah. So we would have a constant survey, and it's very well placed. It's not shown to everybody. It's shown to certain sections of the of the customer visitors to the site. But we have that survey running constantly to try and get some actual qualitative data from customers, because we have all of the data about where our customers are coming from, how much they're spending, how often they're coming back to shop with us. That's all built in automatically to our systems. But actually talking to the customer is really important. Trying to understand, why did you nearly not convert today, or what ultimately made you convert on this product, and what was we change the questions all the time depending on what it is that we're looking to know as a company. But actually, Paul, can you remember the name of the platform that hosts this? KNO, that hosts that survey. So again, that's probably a bit further down the line. That's something we've only started to do really in the last couple of years, but we get a wealth of data and it stops us making assumptions. We're guilty of making a lot of assumptions, and we're trying to move totally away from that. The question we ask a lot though is, what about the customers who aren't on our website? What about what's happening in the market? What's happening with the people who bounce off our site, that maybe aren't going to be really happy to fill in a survey? And we just had our annual board meeting last week, and we signed off a big chunk of expenditure towards investigating that. So that'll be engaging with a brand company. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. I would imagine it's going to be a combination of telephone interviews, maybe focus groups, things like that, to really try and understand what are we missing in the market, the customers who aren't shopping with us at all.
And I think that is a key takeaway for people today. This is not talking at your customers. It has to be a two-way street of engagement to get that repeat customer and build that brand loyalty that Paul was talking about earlier, maybe has dissipated a little bit online if people are looking for the product and then trying to get the best cost. So it's essential that you try to get that interaction and brand loyalty. And I suppose, we talked a little bit about obviously the customers outside of this geographic area, and if you talk about omni-channel, is it as simple as getting your product on, say, Amazon in the UK and Walmart in the US? Maybe not talk about the US at the minute, but especially not if you're Chinese based. But is it as simple as that, or is it a bit more complex?
It's as simple as, if you get accepted onto the channel, which is the first hurdle, it's really simple to just list your product. You can put as much or as little effort into it as you want. And maybe if you're in an industry where customers are searching for your brand and you have a price advantage, you can make it quite simple. It certainly isn't for us. We put a lot of people and a lot of time. Obviously, AI is helping a lot in some of those areas now to really getting the best experience for those customers. So finding out what words are they using to search for this product, what descriptions are they wanting to see, what imagery are they converting on, and that is different per channel in some cases. So it's really understanding the channel that you're on, the product that you're selling, and I think it's worth putting the time and effort in, taking a smaller set of products and really focusing on trying to make them work. It's a poor assumption to just list something on the channel and say, oh, well, that didn't sell, so it's not going to work. The first protocol, is there changes you can make? Is there keywords that you're missing out of your title? Is there something missing out of your description that if you were a customer, you would want to know before clicking the buy box? Have you covered off all of those bases? And does the image do a good enough job? And we're still debating this all the time. We don't have agreement in our teams at all. We all have quite different views. It's hard to lift yourself out of your own customer mindset and saying what you would like to see. The answer to that's test it. Change it up in the listings. Find a different way of doing it if something's not selling. We have a couple of channels over the years that just haven't worked. We've come to the end of the road with them and said, well, we've tried everything we're willing to try and we're just not getting sales in this channel, so the problem is external to us. You need to try and get there quite quickly before you waste a lot of time on it. But that is the case. Now for us, that is smaller channels, that is sort of European based channels. It isn't any of the bigger local ones, but there's no reason why most products won't work on most channels.
Do you use any AI tools now to support with that, in terms of, I'm seeing maybe people starting to use AI tools to support with SEO, content and generating search engine optimized keywords, or are you still sort of veering towards using specialists for that type of thing?
No, absolutely. We're using AI tools. It's really, To operate, I think we're on maybe 19 channels now. So to operate across that number of channels, I think AI is imperative. And AI is not doing the bulk of the work for us. What it's doing is a lot of research.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, you know, again, this is the new space that people are moving into. Are there any particular tools, you know, we're going to chat a little bit more about this in the panel as well, but that you could recommend to people to have a look at? Because it just seems to be every single day there's more and more AI tools coming at you, and it's nearly got, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, so the main one we're using is ChatGPT, and that's a lot of this sort of frontline stuff. You're just looking the quick suggestions back about, you can do simple things like put a picture of your product in there and ask ChatGPT what words are customers using to search for this product, who else is listing this product. From a real research point of view, you can of course ask it to write the descriptions for you, to write the titles for you. I would have a big note of caution there to go over that yourself. You know, don't just leave it to ChatGPT, upload it and never look at it.
We can spot it. The Zs and the emojis are a sure giveaway.
Yeah, absolutely. The customer's getting very savvy to that too. Plus, sometimes it's just wrong. You know, sometimes it's just a way off on the wrong track. So, he's going to kill me for this. But Paul, my brother Paul, is fast becoming a bit of an AI expert, and I'm going to defer all the questions to him because it is not my area of expertise at all. I'm the visionary, we'll call it, in the company. I take a little bit less to do with the technological side of it. Paul has put a lot of time and effort in the last year into really figuring out the best way to bring AI, because we know it is transformational. It's absolutely going to transform businesses, hopefully for the better in the bigger picture. It's finding about how it best works for your company, and we're always experimenting with new tools and new platforms, and we use it for things. We use Perplexity, stuff like that, for analysing some of our marketing copy and just getting a bit of feedback on how it really sits in terms of the market as a whole. We use it for what's called deep research as well, although ChatGPT's come a long way with that too, for really trying to figure out the best route forward. With actually images has been one of our more recent ones. Again, just to what you were saying though, we have a laugh sometimes internally with, we put it out to the teams to come back with their thoughts and stuff, and we can very quickly spot when somebody's come back with what ChatGPT thinks on it. So it does have negatives, but it's hard. There's so much to do. There's just already so much to figure out with online sales and platforms and social and email and Google and all the rest of it. I feel bad nearly saying, here's another one, go and figure that out too, but that is what we're doing. Like if you're asking me what we're doing as a business, we're 100% exploring AI and what it can do for the business. Probably our least AI based team in terms of their own perception of it would be one of the teams I manage, the product team. And I know certainly in the early days the first question back is, well, what can AI do for our department? What's it going to help us with in terms of product? They're now finding all sorts of uses, from things like we'd pass on to the photographer, say how the brief is to be for the room if we're using CGI, which is computer generated imagery. Some of our images are CGI, some of them are on actual shoots. They're now using ChatGPT to help do the image briefs. So they're typing into it, like, we want this room to have this coloured sofa, this colour wall. You know, they'll have these ideas in their head, but they can't find an actual image to show the photographer. But ChatGPT is creating that for them, and it's getting better all the time. So it's about finding the right use for your business. My own opinion is any business not exploring it is probably going to be left behind quite quickly.
I see Colin listening intently to how photography briefs are going to suddenly get significantly better. I'm just very conscious of time. I really could talk to you all day, Claire. It's fascinating. But just before we go, to touch on, you know, you are a big employer in the area. You've quite a number of people over at your site in Carnbean, and I suppose there's a good bit of work to do in terms of managing a team. Can you tell us a little bit about, you've introduced a 4-day working week for your team there. How does that fit into the business model overall?
Yep, just be brutally honest on this one. This was our solution to hybrid working, because we, like everybody else, totally hybrid during COVID, and probably for the year after it, we had most of our office-based teams working from home a couple of days in the week, and we very quickly came to the conclusion that it just didn't work for us as a company. So this is our experience. It's working fantastically for a lot of other businesses, but the industry that we are in, we don't have a playbook. We don't have other people to go and to really figure out how to make it work. We have to figure out a lot of these things ourselves. The only way we can do that is really being in the office together. And I'll just expand that a little bit further. We employ a lot of graduates and people coming out of different areas. And
how many people do you have in total?
There's 55 in total, but all over the years we've been very dependent on our senior team upskilling junior members of staff, and a lot of times it's upskilling them with absolutely no theoretical stuff at all. It's here's how we do it, this is what we think will work, maybe you might go and figure out a better way to do it. And we were finding through the hybrid spell that progression wasn't really happening. Our conclusion on it was just simply that a lot of those junior members of staff, they weren't getting the opportunity to really just listen in on conversations that senior members of staff were having to figure stuff out and to learn from. And we were noticing the rate of progression slowed up a lot, and we decided it was a hard call and discussed a lot. We're going to bring everybody back to the office. So thankfully most of our team were happy enough with this. But we were aware to go out and compete in the market to attract new members of staff, there's going to be a lot of people wanting a hybrid offering that we just weren't willing to do. And we had it in our vision, our 3-year vision anyway, to move to a 4-day week. It's something that we were always planning to do. We just looked at it and sort of said, why are we waiting? One of our values, our company values, is to think big and move fast. And we really just grabbed a hold of it and said, let's do the 4-day week now. We're pretty sure we can make this work. We'll spend a bit of time figuring out the operational hows of it, and then we just rolled it out, and our team love it. And I think the vast majority, if not all of them, would say it's much more preferable to them now than whenever we were doing the hybrid offering. But it's really, I think what we're all looking for is just a bit more flexibility, work-life balance.
I think you're seeing that from so many, and especially younger people now who have all the challenges of AI coming, with them from a learning perspective too. I'm conscious we're running massively over here. I have 2 very short questions for you just to close. What is next for Kukoon?
We're not going anywhere online, so certainly we see eCom as our biggest sales channels in the next couple of years, and we're continuing to develop that. Probably our most exciting opportunity is our retail partnership. So as I touched on earlier, I still think there's a bright future for bricks and mortar. I really do, and I think we'll start to see customers coming back a little bit to it, but I think it has to look a little bit different. I think people are expecting a lot more from the retail environment. For us, standalone retail stores aren't really a big option. They're just too costly, too big of overheads. So we're really looking towards partnerships. We've already rolled them out with Easy Living furniture stores and with Woodies in the south. So if you go into their stores now, you'll see Kukoon stands in them, and that's a really exciting opportunity. We're looking for partners in the UK for that, and we have a couple of options with our new washable collections. They can come folded, meaning that we can get into a lot more retail environments, say smaller retail environments, department stores, that kind of thing. So that's really what's next. We are looking at different sort of products and different routes of expansion that way, but they're still all very early days.
I think if I was to take a key takeaway from some of the things that you've said this morning, it's this business never sits still. I think if any of us think we're doing e-com or doing business and just let it sit there, we're going to get left behind. So I think, that's a massive takeaway from what you guys are doing. You're just always looking forward. And as you say, Paul might be the AI man, but I think we need the visionary in every business as well too. So just to finish off, Claire, if you could leave us with one piece of advice for we've talked a lot about people maybe being in e-commerce already, but anybody in the room who's just maybe starting out on that journey, what could you, I suppose, give them as a little top tip to get started or have the confidence to give it a go?
Yeah, I would definitely say don't overcomplicate it. Social media, while I have a personal dislike for it, just from having a few children now and beginning to understand the real negative impacts of it, there's huge opportunities there to build a brand, and it can be costly. It can be as costly as you want it to be, essentially, but there are plenty of businesses there with very strong organic sales channels. I think Laura will touch on this later on. There's a lot of work, and it's certainly a different model to ours, but it's one that you can get into at quite a low cost base, and that is what customers are wanting to see. So I would say pick a channel, and for me, probably would be leaning into the social channels and make a start on that. As I said, the basics of the platforms to use, if you want to go down the marketplace routes, they're expanding daily, the marketplace options that are there. You can speak to Paul or to me or anybody in that later on. Will be able to help. In terms of your own website, Shopify is where it's at. I wouldn't look past it. I haven't built a website myself, and it's not Kukoon. Before anyone gets excited, it's a much poor cousin of it. You can actually do it yourself. It's just somebody else who's experienced in it probably do it a lot better. Get stuck in waiting for a perfect scenario or a perfect team member, or it isn't coming. It's just not going to happen. So try and strip away some of the complexities maybe that we talked about today, or all of the different opportunities, the emails, the paid Google ads, social ads, and just make a start. That's essentially what we done years ago, and still what we're doing now. When a new opportunity presents, we just go for it and learn as we go.
And Claire, I think that is a theme for today, learn as we go, because that's even why the room has been set up in this particular setup, that during the breaks that people will go and learn from each other and interact. Claire, it's always a pleasure to chat to you, and what a fabulous example Kukoon is of a proud Newry company that's really cracked that online marketplace. I wish you, Paul, the Baba is floating about there somewhere too, the other Paul and all the team in Kukoon and your other businesses. We need to find out about this one as well at some stage. But your other business, every success in the future. Thank you very much, Clare Vallely.